British light heavyweight prospect Joshua Buatsi stops Baptiste Castegnaro, hopefully I'm not butchering that name too badly, in the 5th round to win his second professional fight. Now, unlike Lawrence Okolie and some of the other guys who fought on this bill, Joshua Buatsi actually does have an extensive amateur background. As well as being an Olympian, he was an amateur for, many years. So he is a little more polished than some of the other guys who fought on the show, particularly Okolie, Conor Benn, etc. But he's still a novice professional. And as a novice professional, you have to not only adapt to the fact that the gloves are smaller and that the rounds are longer, and if you've been amateur for any length of time, with Buatsi it's not really an issue because he didn't have a head guard on in the Olympics. But for some of the older amateurs, it's adjusting to not wearing the headgear as well because they've only just got rid of headgear in the past couple of years again. So it's not only adjusting to all those things, but it's also adjusting to the style of professional boxing and the fact that professional boxing is rougher than amateur boxing. In amateur boxing, the referee will penalize fighters who are spoiling a lot more quickly than they'll penalize a fighter for spoiling in professional boxing usually. In amateur boxing, they want to keep everything clean and tidy and neat and all about scoring points and throwing pretty punches. They don't want a lot of inside work going on a lot of the time. They want it all clean. They want the judges to be able to see all the shots easily. In pro boxing, you get guys like Castegnaro who are going to come in and spoil and make it awkward. And you're going to have to learn how to deal with that type of opponent. Now, Buatsi, I felt like, was a little too eager to get the knockout. He probably had a lot of his friends and family there. A lot of people had bought tickets to come see him. And he would have felt that pressure, I think, to a certain extent. He's supposed to be the next big deal. He's supposed to be the next matchroom superstar. So there is pressure there. And sometimes when you have that type of pressure, you feel like, even though it's only your second professional fight, you're supposed to be blasting people out of there. Maybe people are looking at him and saying, well, he should be doing what Anthony Joshua was doing. Joshua blasted everybody out without any type of trouble at all up until he got to the Dillian Whyte fight. And that was the first time he had any kind of issues in a fight. Maybe some people are expecting that kind of thing from Buatsi. And when they don't get it, they start complaining. They start saying, oh, maybe he's not what we thought he was. And maybe Buatsi feels that in the back of his head. He fought in that way, to be honest. He fought in a way where he was trying to impress too much. That's what I felt. Technically, Buatsi's good. He made a few mistakes in there. He got caught a couple of times because he was a little over anxious, but he's not a guy that tends to throw wild shots. His technique seems to be quite polished. He goes to the body well. He turns his shots over nicely. But it's just a little bit of anxiousness there. A little bit of being too anxious to impress. The Sky team were fairly easy on him. They didn't criticize him too much. But Buatsi in the post-fight interview was clearly unimpressed by his own performance. He said, look, I got to learn, I got to improve. And, the interviewer at the end of the fight, in the post-fight interview, asked him, did you enjoy it? And he said, boy, I wouldn't say I enjoyed it. And I think that sums it up. He wasn't happy with his performance. And it's good that he wasn't happy with his performance. That's what you want to hear. You don't want to hear a guy come out of a fight like that and say, oh yeah, that was great. You want to hear him come out of that and say, it was no good. I need to do way better. Because it's only through being self-critical like that that you're going to improve. At the same time, you have to put things in context. You have to not get too down about your performance. You have to recognize the mistakes, but at the same time, don't get too down to the point where you start doubting yourself. Don't do that. Just keep things in perspective and stay level-headed. Buatsi seems like a level-headed guy, but I think people take what Anthony Joshua has done for granted. They think that it's normal for a fighter to be able to be under all this pressure at such a young age with all these expectations on their shoulders and just go out there and perform immaculately in every fight from the first fight up until they get a title shot. They think that's the norm. That's not the norm. Mentally, Anthony Joshua is a very, very special talent. He's a more special talent mentally than he is physically. And physically, Anthony Joshua's got a lot of ability, but mentally is where Anthony Joshua is an exceptional talent. You know, how this guy has managed to make it as far as he has with so few fights and so few hiccups along the way, and in such high pressure situations, and still remain undefeated against the level of opposition he's eventually fought, it is remarkable. You know, the way that Joshua's been able to hold it together when he's got the weight of expectation on him, when he's got people gassing his head up all the time, incredible. Don't expect that from the majority of other fighters. They're not going to be able to hold it together as well as Joshua did. Joshua is an exceptional talent in terms of his mental ability. Holding, you know, keeping his feet on the ground and holding his nerve, etc., etc. Buatsi and all these other guys, don't expect the same thing from them. You know, don't be too harsh on them when you don't get the same thing. Generally, fighters need to mature a lot more, and they need a lot more time to mature than an Anthony Joshua did before you can progress them to the levels that Joshua's been at, right? So people should bear that in mind. Yeah, Joshua is the exception rather than the rule. Other fighters are going to need more time to develop mentally, and once they develop mentally and emotionally, then you'll see that manifest in the ring with better, more mature performances. And again, with Buatsi, his technique is good. So it's not really so much about his technique, it's about getting his mind into the right place to get the best out of him in a professional ring. You know, his mind relaxed, not feeling the pressure, taking things in his stride, so on and so forth. He'll get there. And again, the opponent is going to play a part in that too. If you have an opponent who's going to fight a cleaner fight, and I'm not saying this guy was being necessarily dirty in terms of committing fouls, but he was a spoiler. So when you're in there with a guy who's a spoiler, it can be difficult to look good against a guy like that. I remember when Lennox Lewis fought, you know, a few spoilers. He fought on the way up, got a bunch of guys, but some of the guys of note that did a lot of spoiling, I would say Levi Billups. When Lewis fought Levi Billups, he did a lot of spoiling. Levi Billups was a journeyman. He went the distance with Lewis. Billups got knocked out in 2 rounds by Corey Sanders a couple fights after that. But yeah, he went the distance with Lewis, and he gave Lewis plenty of problems. He gave Lewis some good work that night. Lewis also, maybe one of the other fights where he had a few issues. Derek Williams, when he fought Derek Williams for the Commonwealth title. Was that British and Commonwealth or just Commonwealth? I think Derek Williams was the Commonwealth champion at the time. Correct me if I'm wrong, long time ago. But Derek Williams messed Lewis around for a few rounds. You know, Lewis was looking sloppy, he was missing shots, he was getting frustrated. And he really forced the knockout in that fight. The knockout didn't come smoothly for Lewis against Derek Williams. I think it was in the 3rd or 4th round. I think the 3rd round. And Lewis landed a pair of uppercuts on Derek Williams. You know, 2 of the best uppercuts you'll see Lewis land. I think a right uppercut, then a left, then a straight right hand finished it. And, you know, up until that moment, Lewis hadn't looked particularly impressive because Derek Williams was spoiling and messing him around and frustrating him. That can happen even to a fighter who went on to be as great as Lennox Lewis. He had moments early on in his career where he let fighters get to him in terms of spoiling and messing him around and frustrating him and getting him to try too hard. So to me, that's what happened to Joshua Buatsi, tonight. There wasn't too much wrong with his technique, but he was just trying a little too hard. You know, one thing I will say is that his jab, when he needed to throw his jab more, that's something that his promoter Eddie Hearn said. But at the same time, I think he was loading up on the right hand too much. I want to see him develop more of a left hook, short left hooks, you know, to vary up the power shots, not only coming from the right hand side, but sitting down on that left hook and using that a lot more, doubling it up, trebling it up, going to the body, going to the head with it. You know, I'd like to see more of that from him. Maybe he has that already in his arsenal, but it didn't come out tonight. We'll see in the future. Anyway, drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you felt about Joshua Buatsi's performance and everything else I mentioned in this video. All right, Miss Hatman, I'm out.